Here she comes.
Wow. Okay. Well, that was a big fail. I think we're going to have to abandon that. Sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
let's forget it.
Yeah, because that's
I'll
not
watch it on
liking
my own.
That's not liking it. But I want you to notice how she's going to shift between imperfecto. Every time she's describing, she chooses an imperfecto. And every time there's an event, she's choosing a preterito. Okay. And if you've got a specific question about that, just send me like a quick email with the description
Sure.
of the sentence. You know, here was the sentence. Why was this what it was? Okay. Perdón. I'm sorry. That did not work so great. It did not like that stopping anytime I stopped it. Okay. A ver. Okay. So what we want to do, I'm okay. Any quick questions on that or no? Did most of it make sense? Okay. Yeah. All righty. Let's do an easy share. We're going to take a look at some irregular preterites, and we're going to take them in small chunks and bits. And next week, I will give you some practice with these specific verbs to come in and do during class. Okay. So it will be minimal prep. Irregular preterite is the big, it's like not one speed bump. It's a bunch of speed bumps. Irregular preterite is very hard. Irregular verbs with imperfecto is super easy because there are only 3 verbs in the whole language. Irregular with preterite is all over the place, hard to predict, not great patterns to make you feel good about yourself. They're weird. And there's no way you could get a chart with a bunch of things and it would be meaningless memorization. I'll be honest. So what you want to do is we want to find some patterns that will be helpful. And we want to take like very small chunks of verbs that are irregular, because sadly, some of the most common verbs we use in preterite wind up being irregular. Yuck. Okay. Here's what's going to happen. There is something that will help you to know with irregular preterites. Here are the kind of endings that you're likely to see if it's irregular. And the other end of it is going to be, here's what happens with the stem, the part of the verb that is not the conjugation ending. Okay. Yeah, we're going to take a look at we're going to take a look at the mashup chart. Here is why this is important. Okay. Everything you see in blue is regular preterite that follows the rules that you can predict. AR verbs get the blue kind of conjugation endings. Aste, o, amos, aron. For ER, IR verbs, iste, yo, imos, hieron. Irregular preterite tends, most of the time, to kind of take the AR chart and the ER chart and sort of borrow from both of them. So what we might call a mashup. It takes some elements from the AR conjugations and some elements from the ER-IR conjugations. And it kind of mashes them up. And this will happen.
So those irregular endings work for the AR and the ER-IR verbs?
A verb that is, okay. A verb that is called an irregular preterite will tend to use this chart with the pink or magenta, whatever you want to call it. It will tend to use these endings, and it will tend to say, I don't care if it's an AR or an ER or an IR verb. This is an irregular preterite, and therefore it's going to use this.
Okay.
Yeah. But this winds up kind of borrowing some AR type endings and some ER/IR type endings. I cannot tell you why. It just is what it is. But I do want you to notice there are no accent marks. These accent marks that happened for yo and él a usted, yo, él a usted, they're bye-bye, gone. If a verb is considered preterite, irregular, it's going to use these endings. E for yo, usually. Iste for tú, usually. O with no accent mark for él or ella or usted. Imos for nosotros. And hieron for ellos, ellas, ustedes. Okay. And even then, I have to tell you, this is a most of the time crutch to help you. Okay. Yeah. The difficult part is the stem is also going to go through something that's very irregular. Okay. And dar kind of, yeah, falls into that. Okay, so let's look at two verbs. And these are two verbs I'm going to ask you to practice a lot and like do some prep for next week. I'll give you very, very easy to follow. We're going to use these two verbs a lot next week. Dar and decir. Because quite often we say, she said, he said, we said, and quite often we say, I gave something to somebody. Dar is a common verb to use in preterite. Decir is a common verb to use in preterite. Okay. Here is what's going to happen. Dar is a very short verb. All we got is dar. So if we take off the AR, all we got left is D. But dar, even though you say, oh, it's an AR verb, it's an irregular in preterite. So even though it's an AR verb, you would think it should use the AR chart. It's going to use these endings, and these don't even follow exactly what you saw with the chart I gave you. But just know, D is what it's going to be. D, diste, dio, dimos, distes if you're in Spain, but we're not going to practice that one. Dieron. Yeah. That what and dar won't even, like gospel truth, follow that ending chart I gave you. But just know that dar is an AR verb, but because it's irregular in preterito, this is what it has to be. Now, it tends to be an easy one to learn to conjugate, an easy one to memorize, because all I've got is the D of dar, right? They're pretty short words. Di, diste, dio. Di, I gave. Dio, dio, he gave or she gave. Diste, you gave. Dimos, we gave. Dieron, they gave, right? So it'll never be daron. ARON is what you think. Oh, it's an AR verb, dar. No. Dar is just irregular in preterite. Boom. Okay. Decir is going to do a very, very, very odd thing. Decir, you think, okay, I'll take off the IR from decir. I want to conjugate decir. So I'm going to, in the past, do what we do with all verbs. I'm going to take off the IR, and I'm left with DEC from decir. That whole front end, well, it's going to change into this, DIJ. Why? Nobody knows. But
they must have been drinking some good sangria when they came up with this.
Yeah. So yeah, somebody got drunk and decided this sounds like a good thing. I don't know. Okay. Decir So here is the first very uncomfortable thing. Decir is a very common verb because we say, oh, she said this, they said that. Decir, from that DEC of the stem undergoes a whole different kind of change. And it is going to adopt a brand new stem. Instead of DEC, they're going to be DIJ, all of them, all of them. And now it's going to kind of religiously look at this purple pinkish chart. And it's going to have dije, I said. Dijiste, you said. Dijo, he said, she said. Dijimos, we said. And then this really oddball thing, it won't be dijeron, because that's just too hard to pronounce. It'll be dijeron. It's even going to drop the IERON and just go to ERON. Dijeron. 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 The way I used to remember this as a 14-year-old kid is that if the stem of the preterite has a J with a dot on the top, that takes the place of the IERON. It takes the place of the I because the J has a dot. It takes the place of the I that has the dot. And it'll just be JERON, dijeron. Okay. So I'm going to give you prompts to come in to prep talking using just these two verbs in short sentences in the past. We're going to talk about what somebody gave or what somebody said. And that's all we're going to do for about probably 15 or 20 minutes of next week. And I'm going to give you a very carefully constructed set of prompts so that you can plan. Here's how I would say, I said this to somebody, right? Or she said that to somebody.
Can I ask you one question?
This
Was from that video about dijo, and the last question was Avito gave her telephone number or something like that.
Oh, okay,
And
sure.
So I thought it would be Evita te dijo su número, but he said te dijo Evita su número.
Oh, they
So-
took Evita and flipped it to the back. Yeah, that happens a
Is that
lot.
either one okay? Or they don't usually start
It's
with
either one
Evita's
okay. It depends. Generally, it'll flip to the back if it's a much longer sentence, but
Okay.
it might just flip to the back. Yes, there is in Spanish some flexibility with where the subject can go. Yeah, especially with, that kind of stuff. I'll go back and I'm going to go back and look, and I got to isolate because I want to hear the whole sentence.
Sure. It's the last one in his example.
Especially if it's cuando, especially if it's a part of a clause that says, when she said to this, she was doing something when she said, when she gave him her phone number. Okay. Especially if it's introduced with a when clause.
Okay.
Notoriously with a when clause, the word cuando, the subject may flip to a place where it's like, wait a minute, the subject doesn't lead off. It follows the verb instead of comes in front of the verb. It's a frequent thing. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to practice just those two irregulars. And I might throw in a little bit of our irregular for ir because that's so common. The se fue. Yeah, se fue.
Marilyn, if I picked it up right on that video, there and dar were basically all the same conjugations that.
Yeah.
I'd feel okay to lump that in at the same time because it was just the same exact conjugation.
Ver. Yeah, because ver is the same kind of conjugation like dar. Yeah, that's why certain people clump together certain kinds of irregulars. I don't really consider ver irregular. Technically, it is considered an irregular verb, although when you look at it, it really kind of follows the rules. But there are grammar reasons for that classification that you don't need to know, that have to do with accent marks and stuff that was true 30 years ago, but is not true any longer. So you don't need to know that. So, okay, you know what? I'll throw some of that in there too, because we use ver a lot in preterito. I want to design your practice to work around verbs that will tend to use preterito way more than imperfecto. We're going to say, I saw something a lot more and we'll need preterito. I said something and we need preterito. I gave something to somebody and we need preterito. So these are the high frequency preterite verbs. And I'll throw a little bit of ir in. We'll do 4. Ver, ir, dar, decir. Bien? Okay. All things that will be high frequency, we have to use preterite, but they're not going to follow the usual pattern. Bien.
Yeah.
Okay. Está bien. Good. Do you want another storytelling video in the past to listen so you can hear them
Sure.
do the flip-flop?
Sure.
I think it helps. I think I'm going to send you the college kids transporting, you know, the junky stuff you buy when you're in college to furnish your apartment. It's that kind of story. A couple of college guys who are trying to get the cheapest thing they can to furnish their college guy digs and how they got that thing home. Okay, bien. It is a fun little story. Okay, bien. Eso es todo. That's it, because we're at our 11:30 mark. Yep, bien. Bien.
Bien.
Perfecto.
Adiós.
Muy bien. Ok. Entonces, muy bien. Y hasta luego.
Gracias.
De nada, de nada.